Okay, this is part two of the quotes of Socrates. So here's Socrates sitting at the table. He's talking to Aspasia. Aspasia is the girlfriend, courtesan lover of Pericles, the head statesman in all of Athens. There's Alcibiades, the handsome young warrior guy who became very famous later with the whole craziness in Syracuse. And these are other, philosophers and friends. And so the point I want to make is the Socratic dialogue. A Socratic dialogue is where members of the conversation have a detailed discussion of a topic and explore it from a bunch of different points of view, and that helps you to work towards the truth, a Socratic dialogue. There's also the concept of Socratic questioning, when you teach by asking a question. And it's very common in medical school when making rounds and with residency programs. The senior physician asks the junior medical student or physician a question. What is the most common cause of hypertension? What is the most common? Actually, they don't ever ask about cause. They just say, what's the standard drug to treat hypertension in this category, to treat diabetes in this category? But anyways, the idea is that being asked a question gives you a little bit of stress. Not too much stress, but a little bit of stress that'll help you to remember that moment. And if you don't know, you just say, I don't know, and then they'll tell you the answer, and you should write it down on your note card and then read about it later. But anyways, the Socratic method of teaching is pretty much of a fundamental component of teaching. Okay, so now let's start doing some more quotes from Socrates. The next one by Socrates: to do good to others benefits our own souls. And that's what I meant by he's more Christ-like than Plato is, even though they say that Platonism is related to Christianity. Okay, some more Socrates quotes. The purpose of philosophy is to determine how we ought to live. Useful knowledge is something that helps us to live a better life. The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. And you can use a lot of things. That's a good template to say a lot of things. Like in the Bible, Proverbs, it says, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want to talk about blood flow, understanding of the zeta potential is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, so it's a good opener for teaching a topic. Socrates: in order to decide how to live well, we should try to learn what is good for us and what is bad for us. Okay, I like that. The highest wisdom consists in distinguishing between good and bad. Yeah, you have to be judgmental. You have to discriminate. All day long, we have to make judgments. I will eat the plant foods because they're good for me. I'll avoid the processed food because it's bad for me. And you make judgments all day long about every single thing. Foods, people, situations, opportunities, options. That's normal. You have to do that all day long. All this stuff about be tolerant of everything, be non-judgmental, that turns you into a moron. You can't get through life. And the older people get, the more rapidly judgmental they are. They've got a lot of experience. They have a much better sense of judging things than a younger person does. And that's what Schopenhauer says. It is judgment is the great skill of the last third of life. You get a lot of experience. You can much more quickly see what's good and what's bad compared to a younger person. Like Aristotle said, there are no wise young people. Because young people, they don't have experience. They could be smart in school, but that's not the same thing as being wise. Socrates: courage goes with wisdom. Courage without wisdom is rashness. Marry or marry not. In either case, you will regret it. If you get a good wife, you'll be happy. If you get a bad one, you'll become a philosopher. Socrates: no one can transfer knowledge directly to a student. The most that can be done is to encourage the student to think for themselves, to give them a series of questions so that the student can learn the material for themselves. That's pretty much it. The teacher can tell you a couple key points and concepts, but whether or not it's going to stick with you means you're going to think about it, you're going to read about it, okay? And I like what Schopenhauer says. Schopenhauer says it's not enough to read. You have to think about the material. And that's another reason why you don't want to be looking at your cell phone. You want to spend time just thinking, When you're in the car, it's good to listen to an audiobook. But when you get out of your car, let's say to walk to work or some other place, think while you're walking. Don't be looking at your phone. Don't be listening to music, Idiots are always listening to music. Bum, 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 bum. Or some other crappy loud music. Makes you stupid. You want quiet. You want to think. And you got to learn to get away from the phone. I heard somebody saying the average person checks their phone 144 times a day. Well, that turns you into an idiot, because you're not going to have an attention span for anything else if you're checking your phone that much. Socrates continues, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Okay, Socrates here was asked at his trial, somebody said in the courtroom, aren't you ashamed of going around behaving in such a way that everybody in Athens hates you? And Socrates said, no, I am on a mission from God to follow the truth wherever it leads, and I would be ashamed of myself if I didn't do this. All right, Socrates, good answer. So Socrates, the saint of philosophy. Okay, I hope you found that helpful.